Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Childhood Potential Conference of 2025. And you are joining us now for Sleeping Soundly, Understanding Individual Sleep Patterns in Early Childhood. So, if any of you have really young children who are still napping, this is a class for you. So, I want to start out by telling you a story. Okay, so I've been where most of you have been before, too, in the nap room. My colleague and I had settled everybody. Looked like everybody was asleep. My colleague was going on her lunch break, and I was over by the door, giving myself a big stretch, and getting a drink of water. And I hear something behind me. I turn around, and there were three toddlers, wide eyed, grinning from ear to ear, looking at me like, "Good morning." Oh my gosh. Have you been there before? Just when I thought they were all asleep. No, they were not. From that point and going forward, my colleague and I and families came together to figure out, okay, what can we do to help these children, especially these three children who typically did this on the regular for us. What can we do to help? So we came up with some ideas. We put some ideas into action. We cultivated a space that was peaceful and calm and consistent. We considered sensory issues and what we could do to offer sensory experiences that were calming and not over activating, right? That was a little bit of our problem, but that's another story. All right. So I bet you've been there before too, been surprised by toddlers that you thought were asleep. No, we're not. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Amy Williams with Amy Williams Academy. And my goal in the work that I do is to help educators and families realize how to be the confident, calm, comfortable person that your child needs, how to be the important person in the life of the children that you love that shows up with confidence and skill and a calm disposition. How do we do that? That's part of the work that I get to do. So I'm so happy and honored to be a part of this conference. Okay, let's dive into it, shall we? So I want to drop some knowledge beforehand, before we get into ideas and tips and things like that. So we could all probably agree that quality sleep is important, right? A good, long, solid nap is good for everyone, for us too, right? But when we're thinking about our young children, we know that the duration and the quality of their sleep affects their development and affects their health. So it's an important topic for us to turn our attention to, right? We also probably know that infants until about the age of 1 will take naps 1 to 4 times per day. And you probably notice a rhythm that happens depending on when the young child wakes up. When is their rhythm to have that first nap? And then the period of awakeness and play, and then the next nap and period of awake, right? So they go through the awake periods and the sleep periods throughout their day, right? Now, as your child matures, the naps they need become fewer and sometimes even shorter, right? Sometimes, as those naps decrease in frequency throughout the day, you might have a bigger nap in the middle of the day rather than smaller, several naps. So it depends on your child and the environment that they're in, their frequency and the duration of their naps, right? If ever you have a red flag or a gut issue that you're thinking, there might be a problem here, a wonderful person to talk to is your families. Find out what's going on at home and what the rhythm is at home, and maybe a conversation with their pediatrician. Check if everything's okay, right? Check in, let them know what's happening, let her know what's happening, and find out if they have some ideas or resources to share as well. So, to continue on, by about 18 to 24 months, children will decrease their frequency of naps to about one good solid nap a day. So we can tend to schedule our day where there's a typical nap time. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit too, how our program needs and the children's sleep needs sometimes come together and sometimes they're a little off. So we'll talk about that too, right? So when we have young children in our classroom, we can see that there is some sort of struggle with sleep when we see these indicators, right? So we might notice that it takes 30 to 45 minutes for a child to settle, for their body to calm, for them to settle on their mat or on their cot or in their space where they're sleeping. We also may notice that it takes longer than 15 to 20 minutes to actually fall asleep once they're settled. So we could see that it's an hour from the time we begin the nap process for them to settle and then to drift off to sleep. And how many of you have ever been in that position where it takes a really long time for a child to settle and then to drift off to sleep? Boom. And then it's time to wake up, right? That's happened before. All right. We might also notice another indicator of sleep struggle when a child requires that presence, someone next to them on the bed, next to their bed, next to their spot, or being with them and reclining with them, next to them, snuggling with them for them to be able to go to sleep. Right. Now, I know most people like that, and some people don't like that. So it's something to consider and information to share when you're starting to notice that there might be some sort of sleep struggle with the child that you're talking about, right? Okay, let's see. We might notice a restlessness or frequent changing of positions. So they don't tend to stay in one spot or do minor adjustments during their sleep, but we see lots of restlessness, lots of kicking or kicking off of the blanket or waking up and going back to sleep, waking up and going to sleep, lots of changing and restlessness in their napping spot, right? We might also notice another sign of struggle is that they regularly wake up, right? So instead of that long period of nap or rest or sleep, they may wake up either to full awakeness or like those three toddlers who came and appeared behind me, or they just waken a little, maybe they make some sounds and then they settle back down to sleep. When we notice that in great frequency, it's a place to start, it's a place to notice and just start asking questions. Could bring in the family in the conversation. Talk to other people. What do they see? What do they notice? Now, there may be a time when we question, well, do kids still really need naps? Or is it time for them to stop napping? Do I need to struggle for that hour and a half or so in the middle of the day when a nap is just really not going to happen? Right. Many of you have had that time when most of your children are napping, all is great. And then there's like a few who just don't nap during that time. That can lead to frustration or what am I doing wrong or doubt in your own self, right? So let's take a look at this. Do kids still need naps? Are they more irritable or what we might consider overtired in the afternoon? Are they quick to emotional outbursts or falling apart after a change in a sleep routine, which is common, right? Maybe we notice that they're struggling to stay awake in the afternoon during the daytime after a full night of sleep, right? I'm thinking of a particular child who we thought was finished with nap, consistently wasn't napping throughout the day. And this child joined his classroom in the afternoon part of the day. It was a mixed age classroom. And it turned out that we realized maybe he's not finished with nap because he would, do the morning work cycle, lunch, recess, and instead of going to the nap room where he was wide awake, he joined the extended day in the classroom with the older children doing bigger work. There was more active activity. It was noisier. There was a lot more action happening, right? And we noticed at about the second day that just about every day after that, he would be at his table with his work on his table. And we noticed his eyes nodding. And then some days he would put his head straight up on the table, fall fast asleep. One time he was doing rug work near a table and he pulled a chair closer to him and he put his arm and his head on his arm, fell flat asleep for a good hour. So, what do you do when that happens? Uh, In that point, we chose to just let him sleep. Let's not adjust or pick him up while he's asleep. So that's what we decided to do. We invited him to, if you feel sleepy, there's a rug over there. You can pull out that rug and nap and rest over there. We use the word rest with this particular child because nap had become a word with a lot of activation for this particular child. So Be mindful of that. What do you call it? Do you call it nap? Do you call it rest? Sometimes that can have an effect as well, right? So, when we see that a child is more irritable or quicker to emotional expressions, big outbursts, or if they're struggling to stay awake, then maybe they're not ready to stop napping altogether. Now, it's important to remember all this because we know a period of rest helps with that memory consolidation. Our brain, during a period of rest, puts together and consolidates our memories and what we're learning and concepts that we're absorbing as young children and as adults, right? So, when we have that period of rest, whether it's full on sleep or it's a restful period, we can recharge for the rest of the day. Have y'all heard of an Edison nap where it's about a 20-minute period of rest? And sometimes you could fall asleep for just that 20 minutes of time. And when you wake up, you feel recharged and refreshed, right? That's called an Edison nap after named after, the great inventor Edison. The story goes that he did not sleep a lot and he was an incredible creator and a great mind. And he would rest as the story goes, he would rest in his chair with a pencil in his hand. And as he would drift off to sleep and his hand would relax and release the pencil or the pen, it would drop to the floor and wake him up. He was ready to go. He was recharged. All of his knowledge had consolidated and he was ready to go for the rest of the day. So consider Edison naps. Okay. So I went on a little rabbit trail there. Did you notice? Okay, so now we're back. When should children stop napping, right? When do we decide, okay, if I have a separate nap room in my program or are children napping in my classroom, the processes that go into who naps and who doesn't nap is very individual for your program, right? So depending on your program, how do you make the switch, right? When a child is showing the indicators that they're not napping anymore, what do you do? Well, here's some indicators that will let you know when it's time to have conversations with your colleagues about that, right? Colleagues and families. We notice that they have difficulty falling asleep at nap time, right? That's pretty clear to us. We see that. We may hear from our families that they are not going to sleep at nighttime. Who's had that family who either sends an email or sends a call or a text or sees you the next morning and says, "Do not let my child go to sleep. They were up till 11 o'clock last night and I need my downtime. Do not let them go to sleep." Isn't that hard when the child is nodding in the middle of the day and then they fall asleep? Yeah. And then our families are mad at us because they're awake till 11. Sometimes that happens. Important to form that partnership and find a way that you can come to some agreement on how much sleep, when does sleep happen, etc. Okay. Next, they may have trouble falling asleep at home at nighttime. We notice, or families notice, that they are waking up early. So families will either tell us they stayed awake till 11 or they're waking up at 4:30 a.m. and that's not going to work for my family. So this conversation between the educators and families are really important to hear what is their experience at home and what's happening in your classroom and in your program, right? Okay. We also may notice that they don't show signs of sleepiness on days without naps, right? So they can go throughout the day and they're pretty awake, they're active, they're engaged, kind, respectful, compassionate, happy, right? We don't see any signs of that irritability or the fading of the eyes or those kinds of emotional outbursts, but they're carrying on with throughout their day without any signs of sleepiness. Okay. We can also notice that they're no longer napping at all. So it could be that they're on their napping mat or their cot or their napping space, and maybe they're resting, but they're just awake. They're wide awake. I think of my own daughters, both of them, who stopped napping at about 2 years old. And it turned out, I mean, they weren't disruptive, luckily for their teachers and for us, her family. But the rest would happen and they would just be laying on their bed or on their mat and just awake, right? Maybe they would read books or look at books or play with the corner of their blanket and When it was time to get up, they would get up. But did sleep happen? No. Did rest happen? Yes. Okay, so when you see this slide, this is a reminder to pause, take a deep breath for yourself, open up your arms, stretch out a moment, and we'll carry on. Okay. Have you ever noticed a child, or maybe yourself, has had a case of the grumpies, whether maybe you didn't have enough sleep or you really didn't want to sleep like this, and maybe you found your face like this child here. I mean, it looks like this little one, maybe they didn't like the hat or being bound like that. But it's a photograph that I found that I wanted to share here, and I wanted to give credit to the photographer courtesy of drawing in light photography because this is an image that really captures that expression of grumpy, right? So, well, let's talk about when the case of the grumpies emerged, when it happened. You see it right in front of us, right? So, a couple things, well, several things we can remember. Remember one, that emotions are contagious. So, when we role model or we show the disappointment in our face that they're not asleep, or we might say something, why aren't you asleep? I'm sure those children who popped up behind me, those three wide eyed toddlers that I thought were asleep and they weren't, they probably saw on my face that I wasn't so happy about it. It could have turned to the worst. So be mindful. Our emotions are contagious. And if they see us upset, they will mirror that back to us. Something that we can do when the case of the grumpies shows its face, we can offer something special. However, be mindful that you don't connect it with their grumpy mood, right? It is a book or something that they can hold in their hand or a connection with us that is not connected to their bad mood, or we don't point out their grumpiness. So I'm going to hold your hand or rub your back or here's a book, right? And that can be kind of tricky, right? But when we offer that something special or that something that can be soothing or can bring a sense of calm to that child, that's a tool that we offer them to help feel better for themselves, right? Is there a need that's not being met in that moment? And can we meet that need? Is it water? Is it food? Is it connection? Okay. And another thing to remember is let's refrain from pointing it out over and over again because never has anybody ever snapped out of a bad mood by someone in a powerful position saying to them, "Stop being so grumpy," or "Stop crying," or "Just go to sleep." That I don't know that happening. So, um, let us try and practice very much not pointing it out, not pointing what a bad mood that they're in, right? Certainly, we can validate, "Oh, your face looks upset," but we don't have to add our own judgment to that, right? All right. Now, more things to remember when the grumpies show themselves. We ourselves can slow down. We could slow our roll just to calm our body, bring our voice down a little bit lower, slower, speak more slowly. We ourselves can slow down, right? Try, and then next, in addition to that, is try to honor nap time. And this is especially true to give this little nugget of information to your families that on the weekends or the days that they don't have school is to honor that nap time because we talked earlier about the importance of rhythm, right? Consistency is so useful and helpful, right? So let's honor nap time. If we're out running errands or we're doing this, or maybe we have a special guest in our classroom that throws that nap time rhythm off, we're probably going to be have several children who develop a case of the grumpies. So try to honor nap time and protect that as much as possible, right? And the last thing to remember is that bad moods happen. Children may wake up from a nap and have their face set like this, or are more emotional or more quick to upset, right? It's that happens. We feel grumpy sometimes too. Sometimes we wake up in a grumpy mood. What would make us feel better? What would make that child feel less grumpy? Is it water? Is it a hug? Is it that connection? Is it food? What is it that might help that child feel more comfortable and have those needs met so that you can honor that mood? And we're not going to dwell on it, but we have an understanding that we are all human. Even infants and toddlers are human, and bad moods are going to happen. It's understandable. Okay, but you might be saying, okay, Amy, but yeah, that's great. If they're giving up their nap, then we just offer them a place to rest. We don't require them to nap, but they have to nap. Maybe there is a disconnect between what the child's sleep needs are, the individual child's sleep needs are, and your center or program practices, right? So if there's a disconnect, some things can kind of happen because of that, right? So when we consider this disconnect, we want to also consider this. When there's a disconnect, it can lead to more increased stress for children and make it more difficult for them to rest when there's tension in the room or an expectation for them to go to sleep, right? Also, consider this. When this happens, this can cause conflict for staff, right? Like you can't leave for your lunch break because 12 children are still awake. You can't leave yet, right? Which can throw staffing schedules off, right? Now, this is Amy talking like a school leader or school administrator, making sure that everybody has their lunch break and their morning break and their afternoon break. Absolutely important. And a point to have conversations about as a team if you find that a pattern is emerging, children's sleep patterns are beginning to shift and change, and how agile is your own program's scheduling of breaks and rest periods for staff too. Okay. And it could cause conflict for staff. Somebody might be really hungry and they gotta go, or they have to go to the bathroom. That happens. Yeah. Okay, another thing to consider when there might be a disconnect, when there is tension in the room, it increases that negative emotional climate in the room and could cause a greater difficulty for children to settle and to drift off to sleep. Right? Deep breath. Get some water if you haven't had some. I'm going to have some. Okay. Now, next, we're going to shift gears a little bit and we'll talk about attunement. And attuning is a tool that you can use in lots of different circumstances. But today we're going to talk about it and how it relates to helping children find that place of calm, settled, restful experience, which maybe will lead to nap. So, what is attunement anyway? So, attuning or attunement is our ability to be aware and to respond to the child's needs. It's deeply connected to our emotional connection and our emotional attachment. When we attune with another person, especially with a young child, we're communicating with them the message of, I see you, I get it, I understand that, I'm with you, you're not alone. You're unconditionally loved and respected because I am here and I'm showing up and I'm showing you with my face and my tone and my volume and my body and my words that I understand where you're coming from. I'm trying my best to figure out what is your inner perspective, what's your inner reality, right? That's where we're moving toward attunement, where we are attuning with children so we can communicate verbally or non-verbally that we get it, we get them, right? So our mirror neurons are activated during attuning or during active attunement. And this mirroring and emotional labeling are techniques that we could use to help children get a sense and make sense of what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. So we can name, what we see. We can mirror back with our facial expressions with, oh, ouch, that hurt. Or, oh, you look happy. So we're mirroring what we see them doing and putting words to it. So we're encouraging vocabulary building, right? One of the key ingredients of attuning. We get to show them what we see and add some words, add some labels to it so they can begin to express themselves, not only through their body and their tone and their volume, but also with words as they're acquiring language at their own speed. Another thing about attuning is the importance of being mindful of our body and the way that we use our voice. So the gentle touch or our voice used by a caregiver, by an educator, their important adult in their life builds that child's sense of security. I am safe with this person. This person will keep me safe. This person sees me. This person understands me. And that experience begins so early, right? As they get older, they're learning more language, they're learning more about the world, they're able to communicate in the best way that they can at that point in their life, right? And when we attune, then we help build their sense of security and their sense of safety and their sense of belonging in our community and around us. I could talk about attuning for ages and ages. All right, take a deep breath. Okay, now let's talk about sensory needs. So, in your infant or toddler program, you may have different kinds of sleeping setups, right? You might have a crib, or you might have a mattress on the floor, or a cot on the floor, or mat, or whatever it looks like in your classroom. Your children are going to show you when they have sensory needs. They're going to use their body to meet the need that their body is telling them that they need, right? Their body feels like climbing. Their big muscle groups are just itching to contract and release. So they're going to climb. They're going to throw their leg over the crib. They're going to climb onto the shelves or onto the tables, right? We're going to see that. They will let us know what their sensory needs are. Now, being gifted observers, we can observe that, right? When we're not distracted by all the things that we have to do or all the things that we're supposed to do and all that kind of thing. How often and how much time do you give yourself daily to observe and to notice, right? How are you documenting that so that you could see what patterns you notice? Often when we protect that time for our own time, our own self to observe and in communication maybe with our colleague, our co-teacher, something like that, we could come up with a strategy that helps the child meet their sensory needs in a way that is okay, right? In a way that is safe and brings joy to others and is not bothersome to others. So let's take a look at that. So if we're thinking about, let's just go through many of the senses. There are 5 that we know about, and then a couple that maybe we don't know so much about, and even more that we're figuring out about going forward. So let's see. We're going to start with visual. So we may notice that some children have visual seeking sensory needs, right? So what we might see is a child as they're going to rest, looking around and noticing things, right? They might notice our glasses, or they might notice our apron, or they might notice all the things on the wall, or what's happening with the squirrels outside and outside of the window, or what's happening here. So we notice that they are seeking that visual input as a feels like, "Huh, this feels satisfying for all that visual sensory input." We may notice that visual seeking behavior might be keeping them from getting settled and into that restful space, that restful period. Now, I did know a child once upon a time, and what worked really well for us at school, we began to have a conversation with the family, right? Because there was a lot of looking around and rolling around and eyes moving from thing to thing. And there seemed to be a period of activation instead of a period of deactivation or rest, settling, right? Turns out at home that the important adults at home wore eye masks to sleep, right? With little silk eye masks, and this particular family wore silk bonnets on their head when they went to sleep, and we thought maybe we'll try that. So this particular child had a little silk bonnet that we put on her head and a silk eye mask. And that in our particular program, we talked with our licensor about that and requirements, and it turned out that was okay. Certainly, you want to check with in your area, what your licensing requirements would say yes or no to, if it's a safety thing or not. So check that out. But for this particular child, we got a green light to try that. And for that particular child, it seemed like it was almost a ritual to put on the bonnet and to put on the silk eye covering. And one, it was so tiny, right? But this was a clue to her that she could close her eyes and settle down for sleep. Once we started that process with her, she was out like that. That was a ritual that had been happening at her home for as you know for the longest time. So we echoed that at the school, and this child was able to drift off to sleep pretty quickly. This child was visually seeking, right? Not just at nap time, but throughout the day, right? Super curious, wanted to look at things and touch things, and looked at books with great enthusiasm, right? All the colors and the shapes, and had lots of curiosity about the way things looked and the way things were shaped. And it grew as she grew older too. So something to notice if you notice, this child is a visual seeker. They tend to seek out visual input, right? How can we help that in our encouraging of a restful period? So that's one story about one particular child and something that worked for them. So let's move on to the next one. So auditory. So you might notice in children that they may seek and notice excuse me, they seek and notice all the sounds that are happening outside. They'll call out, "Do you hear that truck?" Or "Is that Miss Anita coming down the hallway?" Or "I hear such and such." So they're noticing all the sounds around them. So it could be that it's a child who really struggles to sleep unless it's completely quiet and completely silent. And that could be difficult to achieve in most programs, especially if you have nappers and children who are awake in the same classroom, right? So, what can you do, right? What can you do with a child who is auditory seeking to help them settle and get to a restful space? Sure. Could you use music? A music with a steady rhythm, a music with some sort of with the volume turned low. Consider the style, right? So maybe not Mozart, that's a super complicated composition, but something that's more simple, slowed way down, right? I'm thinking of the twinkle music, that's what I call it, which is soothing and calm. The water sounds, and sometimes water sounds can be activating. So you want to just be mindful of that. So notice, try something, notice it, and make an adjustment if you find that this is not working, right? So it could be that you might find a sound machine or an app on your phone or somehow something on Spotify that has maybe white noise or a fan sound that has a hum that meets the need that an auditory seeking child is seeking, and then they get that need met, they're able to settle, they're able to drift off to sleep. Now, what about children who we might consider more oral seeking, oral sensory seeking, right? Lots of things go in their mouth, right? They might still have a pacifier at home or might still be bottle fed, or in their experience of the world is focused on their mouth, which is typical for many children. Now, if it's what can we do for a child who is consistently seeking that oral input to settle and to rest? What could we do? Maybe first we notice that, and maybe they have something that they can chew on. There's a product called a Chewy, and I know that's a brand name, but there's things that you can chew that are okay to chew. Some are in a necklace with a breakaway cord, or on beads on a bracelet or something like that. So you could get creative on what they can use in their mouth for their own calm, settled sense of safety and getting their need that oral need met, right? We can consider snack just before nap to be something that's crunchy, right? Either granola or carrots or something that has a little more bite to it, if you will, right? We might want to be mindful and keep maybe they have a cup of water or a water source close to them so that they can take their own water, which is satisfying that oral need as they settle to sleep. Okay, now let's talk about thermoception, temperature, right? Could be, do they want a thin blanket or are they more comfortable with something that's heavier and thicker, right? Do they want to kick their shoes and their socks off so their feet are out from under the blanket, right? And it could be, I mean, think about our own selves. Are are you in a relationship where maybe you share a bed with someone and somebody wants all the blankets and someone just wants the sheet, right? Someone has their feet sticking out and somebody is super cuddly and cozy underneath it, right? Maybe, well, I'm telling you about my house. What happens at our house? Whose feet are out? Mine. Who's snuggled up with all the blankets? My husband. And we've made it work. And that is because our thermoception needs are different, right? So consider that for the children in your classroom. Some may want a thinner blanket, some may want something thicker. Okay, now let's talk about olfactory, the sense, right? Now, many of us have probably tried a diffuser or a lavender rolly ball to help get a sense of calm and create that space, right? Some things to remember, check with your licensing person who runs your licensing or the agency that supports you in that and check on the guidelines on that. I'm pretty certain. I know that in our area here in the United States, essential oils are always kept locked away from children. A diffuser, if it has a cord, is out of reach of children, and cord is secured so that children can't pull it down. So there are some things to consider if you use a diffuser. And if a child, and this is for children who are seeking this sensory input of smell. They notice when you have a different lotion on. They notice when the milk smells funny, or they could smell the bananas in the bowl across the room, right? They might be sensory sensitive to the smells and scents around them. So this is a place where we can consider, how can we help that child have that need met? And we're thinking of the rules and regulations on how to keep them and all the other children safe, right? Sometimes, and you want to ask your licensor, children may do well with a little lavender roller ball on their wrist, or one child I knew had liked it we just rolled it on a Kleenex tissue and he held that tissue and went to sleep. And this was in conversation with this child's family. Is it okay? Yes, we use lavender at home. He loves lavender. It's great. Please use it. And so, with some communication with family, you may create some sort of form where they give permission to use a rollerball, or that they're aware and that's okay to have that on a tissue. Again, communication, super important. And in that particular instance, it was really helpful to hear, "Oh, you use lavender at home and it works really well? Great, good to know." And so we tried to carry that out through their days when they were with us at our school. I'm thinking of that child, and he always smelled like lavender. We should have known. Okay, let's see. Now, what about children who are seeking that tactile input, the touch, the feeling, this like that, right? So this picture just really makes me happy because clearly this child is in a blissful state of happiness. Someone is stroking their cheek and they're so calm, so relaxed, just at the precipice of sleep. And who among us really loves to have our hair tickled or our back rubbed as we go to sleep? How do we rest and get to that restful state through tactile sense? Maybe we want somebody to tickle our back, maybe we don't. Same with children, right? Now, something to remember around tactile, and this is where I'm a dance movement therapist, so my movement analyst hat comes on right now. And it's important to be mindful of how the touch is done, right? First of all, we're going to talk about consent. Would you like a back rub? Would you like me to hold your hand? Would you like a hair tickle or whatever it is? So it's important to ask a child and receive permission because they will let us know yes, and they will also let us know no, right? I'm thinking of another particular child who I was substituting this particular day, and I learned from another staff, like, "Psst, oh yeah, that child likes like this kind of pat." And my colleague Fatima showed me on my hand. She said, it's like this. And I thought, oh, that's firm, but okay. So I asked him, would you like a back pat? Yes. So I did the back pat just like Fatima told me, and he was out like that. Right? It's important to know. Often the light touch can be activating for children who are going into a restful state and who may be more tactile sensitive. So, as you're forecasting, as you're narrating what you're doing, you're asking for consent, you're getting an agreement for a touch to happen, that you are aware that the really, really light touch can be activating. It can be soothing and it could also be activating. So you're going to try something different if that doesn't work, right? Yeah. So something with a little more pressure is tends to be more welcome with children who are tactile sensitive. Now, this kind of leads us to proprioception, right? So this is the sense that I think about pressure, right? Contract and release of muscles. How much do I contract? How much do I release throughout the day? Do I seek that contraction? Do I really feel satisfied in my body when I can lift something heavy or push something heavy or climb onto something that like a table or a shelf, right? So we may have children who are proprioception seeking, right? So, what about these children? What can we do? What do we notice? We can notice and be aware and make adjustments of their position, right? Do they prefer to be right on the edge of their mat or at the bottom of their mat? Like, where is their body in space in relationship to their blanket and maybe to their clothes? Are they too tight or are they too loose? Some children prefer a weighted blanket. And again, weighted blankets are something that you want to talk with your licensor about. Certainly, weighted blankets are not designed or safe for infants. So, as children get older, that's another conversation that you can have with an OT that you have, or reach out to me and we can talk more about the use of weighted blankets or not using weighted blankets. Okay. So there's more to learn about that and the therapeutic use of that kind of adaptive blanket. Okay. So when children are proprioception seeking, it might be, remember that child who really liked that parent? Probably some proprioceptive seeking needs for that child. So a pat that was pretty firm, not too hard, but right as he liked it, right? You're going to find that sweet spot, right? It could be that you do something called joint compressions, right? Where you do squeezes, squeezes, squeezes. Again, you're going to ask for consent and talk through as you're doing what you're doing, communicate with families that you're doing it. So it could be that you press your hands together and relax, and press your hands together and relax. Or would you like a hug? Hug, release. So that can satisfy that child's need for proprioceptive input, right? So let's see. Um, what else was I thinking? Oh, um, yeah, back biscuits, something that I call back biscuits. Again, you're going to ask for consent, talk about what you're doing, and a back biscuit looks like this. So if this is a child's back, then I'm just going to make biscuits. So gentle squeezes, 1, 2, 3. And if I can match it with my breath, even better, even better. Because what? Attuning, right? So when we're matching our breath with the child's breath, that is a nonverbal way that we can attune with them, right? Okay, well, what about vestibular? Because we talked about proprioception, you can't talk about P without V. So let's talk about vestibular input, right? So this is that my body in motion sense. So rocking might be helpful for a child who is vestibular seeking. Rocking rhythms, maybe the pats on the back have some sort of rhythm. If you've got music on that has some sort of beat, when you can match that, sweet. And then on top of that, bonus extra credit, if you match your breath to that, then you're, like a rock star in the nap room. So the vestibular sense is that rocking sense. So those of you who have been in a nap room, and you probably know children who really found that satisfaction when you put your hand on their back and just rock back and forth, right? You know what I'm talking about? Or young children who want to be rocked like this, like on your body. Yep. That's vestibular. Yeah. Let's take a breath. All right. So, some final tips on getting to successful sleep without a fuss. Wouldn't that be nice? There are some ways that we can get to it. So, here are some ideas that you can try. Number one, make nap time look like nighttime. So, as much as possible, darken the room, the curtains, turn the lights down low, make it feel like nighttime. What's their rhythm at home before going to bed at home? Maybe it's playtime, followed by dinner, followed by books, brush your teeth, put on pajamas. So there's a routine that happens at home, ideally. And if not, this is a point of education that you could share with families that they could try at home, right? So make nap time look like napped nighttime. Next, set the stage with quiet time, right? So the music is turned low, the lights are down low. Your body begins to move more slowly. The way that you use your words is softer, slower. So that's one tool that we're in complete control of. We set the stage with our own voice and our own body, right? A meditation routine. Now, I think of about older children, maybe preschoolers with this, but leading through a meditation, right? Like take a deep breath and blow it out. Take a deep breath in and blow it out. Deep breath in, blow it out. I'm thinking of a particular teacher who had such skill at the very beginning of the school year with, a handful of brand new students. They would make the transition between, they had lunch, recess, and then nap. And sometimes recess into nap can be a really tricky transition, right? So they're outside playing and their blood's flowing and they're super excited when they come in. It might take a little bit longer to settle because their body has been really activated for that period of time. So just be aware of that. So this particular teacher did something where he invited all the children to be on their backs, and the invitation was to listen and notice all the things that you hear. But we had to be really quiet to hear those things, right? And then he would invite children to come over to him in the gathering and then say quietly what they heard. And what happened was handful of students, as they were taking deep breaths and trying to listen to what they noticed, they fell asleep. And then it was the children who stayed for extended day and were older, who weren't napping, who would, okay, what did you hear? Oh, yes, you heard Miss Amy's keys. Oh, yeah, you heard Miss Anita roll the cart down this. Oh, yeah, and you heard that. What did you? Oh, the air conditioner. Oh, you heard that car go by? Sure. Yeah, I heard that too. Now, what would you like? What work would you like to choose? And then dismiss the direct. Okay. Now, Eddie, what would you like to choose? Okay. And then they dismiss to work after that calm, little Edison period, right? Okay. So set the stage with quiet time, like Mr. Kurt, and that meditation routine, like Mr. Kurt. Now, storytime music and song can be helpful, right? So again, you're going to use your observer's eyes to notice, is that music activating or is it calming? Do I want to change the music? Right? I bet you all of you have a Spotify playlist that you use during nap time. I bet. Okay. So find that playlist that works for you and that works for your community of children, right? Maybe it's your own voice that sings or plays guitar, or if you've got that sort of talent, then by all means use that for sure. If you are skilled at telling a story in a way that is calm and soft and settling and soothing, then by all means use that talent, right? And again, soothing movement with consent. Now, here's some more, right? You came here for some ideas. So check this one out. Start getting ready for nap about 30 minutes before you want nap to happen, right? Yeah. So think about, okay, 30 minutes ahead of time, are we on our way? Are we beginning to turn the lights down low? Is the music shifting? What are the cues that children will notice that we are moving into a restful time? right? So, yeah, that starts about 30 minutes before. Okay. Give some downtime after recess, like the example I shared with you with, okay, everybody come in from recess, find a spot on your back, close your eyes, deep breath. What do you hear? Notice and recognize and honor the process. Honor the consistency of the process. So, as much as possible, you want to keep the routine and honor that nap time and that nap period in the day, right? If you have a substitute that's coming in, is it clearly indicated what the routine is? Another thing to remember is to allow for their body and mind to settle. So, there will be some wiggles and adjustment until they settle. You've probably seen that in action all the time. Notice if you feel frustrated when some children are more active and take more wiggles to adjust and settle. Notice your own self and your own feeling of maybe you feel annoyed or wish they would just go to sleep because it's been a morning, right? Notice that. Okay. That is your feeling. Let it pass and then allow the child to settle themselves as much as possible. We can role model that settled body and a settled mind. And that's one of the tools that we use. That's attunement, right? Okay. So now we're at the end of our talk here. And I'd like for you to pause right now and go get a piece of paper if you don't have one yet. And I'd like for you to write down one thing that you'd like to try from what we talked about today. So, what is the one thing that you plan to do? Kind of something that you learned today that you forgot about and remembered, or something new that you've never heard about, or something that you want to talk to a family member or a colleague about the next time that you're in the classroom with students. What's that one thing that you plan to do? And write it down. In addition to writing that down, put a date on it, right? And some people have alarms on their phone or where they can set a reminder. So set it for about a week, and then you'll get a reminder of, oh, did I do that thing? Sometimes that helps hold you accountable to do the thing that you want to do. So pause right now, go do that thing. And when you've got it written down, come on back. Okay, so now we're back. I want to thank you so much for attending and for selecting this class. I'm super happy that you were here. I want to extend a special offer to childhood potential participants. So, I have a whole series of webinars, asynchronous training that's available for educators around the world. And I invite you to go to my website, go to the tab that says register, find a webinar that you love, and reach out to me through my email and let me know which one you want because I would like to give you buy one, get one, right? So choose which one you want and which one that you would like to gift to someone else. So you buy one and then you get one. So check it out. Here's a way to connect with me. You can reach out with me to me. Let me know if you want to be on my mailing list so you're up to speed on everything that I have that's available to educators and families around the world. You can find and follow me on Instagram at Amy Williams Academy and Facebook, Amy Williams Academy. My email is amywilliamsacademy@gmail.com and my website, amywilliamsacademy.com. And there you will see all that I have to offer to you and your colleagues and your families that you serve. It's been my honor to be here. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time that you dedicated to this. I know it's a sacrifice to sit down and pause and learn together. I just want to say thank you for that. So until next time, I appreciate that you're here. And yeah, I hope we'll be able to work together soon. All right.